and welcome to the Culture Cast. I am your host, Chris Dashew, and I am joined by my good friend, currently marooned somewhere in the great state of California, one of the writers on DC's Titans, and frequent guest on the now, I guess, closing up shop Kolchak Tapes podcast, Mr. Richard Hatem.
Hey, Chris.
Hi. I should just introduce you as Richard Hatem, writer of the Mothman Prophecies. I love that movie, so I'm not doing it to get under your skin, so...
Oh, you're talking about Mothman?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad. Well, because it was not a massive hit, so I'm always happy when anyone says, hey, that movie, Mothman Prophecies, I loved it.
Yeah, of course.
You've just earned yourself a lunch.
Yeah. Wow. And next time I'm in LA, we are going to get together. Last time I was in LA, schedules didn't align on my end the way I wanted to, which is unfortunate because I'm sure, very close because I don't know anything about LA, so everything's within like 5 minutes of each other, right?
No, that's the trick. Nothing is within 5 minutes of even itself.
Right. Well, it's kind of like Dallas now. Dallas is the same way. It's like, how long does it take to get to this restaurant? 20 minutes. Oh, how far is it? Like a mile? So, yeah.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah,
so
it's like that. I always feel sorry for people who like come to LA and then like, okay, let's get a hotel where we can go to the beach and Disneyland and Hollywood easily.
Right, that's not how that works.
Well, you can't. So just get used to seeing LA from the inside of a car.
Well, and when where I live here in Nebraska, people sit and are like, oh my God, I don't want to go downtown. It's so far away. It's like 7 miles, if that. And I'm just I'm just like, what the flying fuck? Like, guys, come on. Like, it's nothing. But speaking of spending time in cars, speaking about weird things going on with weird people in parts of the United States that most people have never visited, we are talking about David Lynch's 1990 film, Wild at Heart.
Yeah, we are.
Can I talk to Lula?
You are not gonna see him ever.
I can't. I'd go the far end of the world for you, baby.
A man can't ask for more than that.
You move me, Sale. You really do.
You want me to shoot Sailor in the brains with a gun?
Uh-oh. I didn't have much parental guidance.
Baby, you better run me back to the hotel. You got me hotter than Georgia asphalt.
This whole world's wild at heart and weird on top.
Yeah, I didn't, until I started watching it, I didn't even know it was a David Lynch film. I mean, I did, at some part of my brain knew that, but for some reason, when we were talking about Wild at Heart, I kept thinking that it was a Francis Ford Coppola film. What was I thinking about?
I have no fucking clue what you were thinking about.
Is there some weird Coppola film with the word heart or hearts in it or something? I don't know why I was making that, but the minute I started watching it, I'm like, oh, wait a second, David Lynch. Yeah, this is a David Lynch movie, and boy, is it.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's kind of hard not to realize that because this movie has all the trappings of David Lynch. So unlike the last podcast where we talked about Dune, which also an adaptation of a book, it does not feel like a David Lynch movie in some respects because the Frank Herbert source material is already so weird. So the weirdness of the source material trumps the weirdness of David Lynch and what he brings to things. Wild at Heart is... The film is just... it's insane. The film is insane. It is verifiably an insane, crazy film.
It's definitely insane, and but it's insane in a way that I think was kind of common. Like, when I was watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, late 80s, early 90s. The movie was released in 1990. There were a lot of... They're like early Coen brothers and like the movie After Hours. There was just a lot of movies where the aesthetics seemed to be people are weird and reality is heightened, and there was like a lot of that, a lot of like just weirdness for weirdness sake.
Well, and so here's the thing. So it has David Lynch's name on it. He did the screenplay. It's based off the book by Barry Gifford. It stars Nick Cage and Laura Dern, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about Nick Cage. It also stars Willem Dafoe. Crispin Glover is in it, but like...
yeah.
2 seconds. Diane Ladd, Laura Dern's actual mother, is in the film, and then there's the kind of the David Lynch players, Sherilyn Fenn, Cheryl Lee, Jack Nance, kind of the folks that, if you're familiar with David Lynch's work, Grace Zabriskie is also in the film, Isabella Rossellini. These are people that should be recognizable to you. So they're all there, and it is a road film about two characters who are running from one of the characters' overbearing mothers. Laura Dern's character, her mother is overbearing. What this reminded me of is like if if True Romance was absolutely an insane film, and not just like a rather straightforward Tarantino film.
Yes. I thought of True Romance also. Although it's funny, I also felt that watching this movie, which I had never seen before.
I had not either.
I'm like, but didn't you feel like, Tarantino watched this film and liked it? I mean, there were little flashes of future Tarantino things. Like when they were dancing, there was a little Pulp Fiction. There's even a character named Marcellus. Like, it's not Marcellus Wallace, but it's like...
Marcellus Santos?
Yeah, Marcellus Santos, that I kept thinking, why did that sound familiar? Oh, it's reminding me of Marcellus Wallace from Pulp Fiction. Like, there were just little things that subconsciously I feel creeped into other Quentin, which is not a hard argument to make. I mean, that's a guy who watched every movie and loved every movie, and it shows in his movies. And I think this was one of them.
Man, you're being too nice. It's called he watched every movie and then ripped it off and didn't give any of the credit to anyone until he was pointed out for ripping them off.
Okay. That's one way of putting it. Sure.
That's the only way to put it, because I'm not going to let Tarantino continue to get away with it because people refuse to admit it.
Well, it's a weird thing because everyone, like Scorsese, when he talks about any of his movies, he'll say, okay, now this sequence is based on this movie, from the 1940s called, the Eyes of Death or whatever. And it's typically a movie you've never heard of, and it may not be a shot for shot, but it's like, there's a tone to a sequence that he then imports into a different setting and a different time. And people do that all the time, and that's cool. That's art. I get that. But it sounds like you're talking about something else.
Well, Tarantino, I think, is more of a... there's a difference between being inspired by something and outright copying it. So...
Yeah.
But we're not talking about True Romance. We're talking about Wild at Heart. So, Richard, sitting down to watch this for the first time, like I did myself, what did you think of True Romance? Or, oh, God. What did you think of Wild at Heart?
I gotta say, I enjoyed it. In other words, I enjoyed the experience of watching it because I had sort of forgotten the way movies used to be. Like, I mean, I know, like, I go back and watch Back to the Future, every year, and Die Hard, which came out 2 years before this. But I kind of forget, like, I don't go back to David Lynch a whole lot. Sounds like you're doing a whole David Lynch retrospective, but I was like, wow, this used to be like you could do this. I don't think a big major film could be like this now. I mean, it's weird. It's weird in terms of, we keep saying weird. The performances are so heightened. I mean, just talking about the acting, I'm trying to imagine what was going on set. Were people rehearsing and doing lines, and was David Lynch going, no, louder, weirder, insaner, more? Like, how do you get a performance like Diane Ladd's performance? It's out of control.
Yeah, Diane Ladd in this movie is it is something. It is a performance I honest to God believe only David Lynch can get out of actors.
Yeah, it's like, what does he say? Is he like, okay, this is going to be sort of Southern Gothic, but dialed up to 11. I mean, Laura Dern also. I mean, Nicolas Cage, you almost don't even have to tell him. But these other people have turned in other more subtle performances.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, because Nick Cage in anything, and he's just, I mean, what is there to say?
It doesn't take a lot to, Face Off, Kick Ass. It's just like, have fun with it, Nick, and you're done. He's already there. But this is like the opposite of 70s movies that feel like documentaries, like people are just sort of living in front of a camera and it's very real and subtle. This is the polar opposite. This is self-consciously heightened, and self-consciously so.
Well, that's what it feels like, and that's what it is like. It is. There's so much going on. Like, there's absolutely so much going on in this film that I'm kind of, there are scenes in this film that I'm just like, I'm almost at a loss. Like, what is even going on?
I think you're talking about, I mean, the scene, like somewhere right in the middle of the movie is the scene where Harry Dean Stanton's character gets kidnapped.
Oh.
And then suddenly he's being held in some room with literally, like, people are like gibbering madmen. Like, they're literally insane. It was like something out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're just like hooting and screaming, and they're coming right up into the camera, and it's like, whoa, okay, this was weird, but now this is a standout in terms of tone. I don't even know what the fuck that scene was about.
No, and that's what I'm getting at. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this film that's just, oh God. Look,
Well, let me ask you: there have been other David Lynch movies that you have podcasted about, I'm guessing.
This entire month is David Lynch films.
Okay, so how does this fit in alongside, I don't know, Eraserhead or Elephant Man, or, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what? I mean, Lynch is weird, but.
Well, here's the thing. This is, again, like, this feels like his take on a road movie. And again, it's not him doing this, from scratch. This is a adaptation of a book by someone else, by Barry Gifford. So,
yeah, which I did not read, so no, I don't know if the tone is set in the book.
Well,
this is not a movie where this got away from him. I mean, you're watching and you're like, no, this is exactly how he wanted it. So at a certain point, he made a decision. He's like, okay, look, this is not going to be realism. This is not going to be. I mean, Lynch always does weird stuff, but not always in the exact same way. And this is very different. I mean, there's a lot of them. Well, not thematically, but a lot of people talking about Wizard of Oz a lot. I mean,
which was just super strange
because the story does not thematically track with Wizard of Oz at all. Like, you can't look at this and go, oh, this is like a dark Wizard of Oz. It's like, I mean, I kept trying to go, what are the thematic touch points? And I couldn't find them. Could you? I mean,
No. I couldn't find them either. And it doesn't have that, like, oh, this is like a retelling thing. It feels like the Wizard of Oz stuff is just kind of shoehorned in there. There's like there's fantastical elements going on that don't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah,
right.
But it makes it feel like it does, because every few minutes someone says something about the Wicked Witch of the West or the Yellow Brick Road, and you're like, okay, so this is hanging together. But then I'm like, I don't know. I've seen Wizard of Oz a lot, and I'm pretty familiar with all of its stories and themes and characters and ideas, and none of this really matched up. In fact, by the end of this movie, other than a lot of weird performances and fun scenes and then some really dark scenes, it was a little hard for me to kind of get the point.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the big problem that I had with this film. I don't know what the point of the film was.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of it, I genuinely was confused as to what the point of the film was, because, look, it's a road film, so road films, they seem to just kind of end, which is fine, but this just really it seems like there's almost a fake-out ending.
Yeah, it's like, okay, let's talk about the ending. Let's talk about, okay, so it looks, see the movie recently, it looks as if our lovers, Laura Dern and Nicolas Cage, are finally going to be reunited, after, he's been re-imprisoned for a few years, and it looks like they're going to be together, but then he walks away. And then he walks away, gets beaten up by a very strange gang, and in his sort of hallucination after his beating, he sees a character who's like Glinda the Good Witch, who says to him basically,
don't turn away from love.
Don't give up on love, right? Yeah. And then he's like, but I'm wild at heart, and I didn't receive a lot of good parenting when I was young. And she says, but don't give up on love. And then he sort of comes out of his stupor, thanks the gang for beating him up, goes back to Laura Dern, and they are ultimately reunited. And it's like, well, okay. It structurally, it has the feeling of a conclusion. I just don't know what it was it wasn't answering any question that was posed very clearly. I
was about to say, what was the question that was posed to begin with?
Yeah, it was like, oh, he's finally learned his lesson or something. It's like, well, okay, it sort of has the structure of an ending without really being illuminating.
Right. Well, and there's, look, I mean, it is a David Lynch movie, so there is a lot going on that is just seemingly things happening for what could be interpreted as no reason or a convoluted reason. And, the ending is just, the ending, I think, is like the really prime example of it. I mean, you have Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, playing the Good Witch, and it's like, what? I guess because Laura Dern's character keeps bringing up the Wizard of Oz.
And so it's on his mind, and he associates it with her, with Laura Dern. And it's like, I'm buying into your thing. But it's not like their philosophies, Sailor's, which is Nicolas Cage's character, it's not like Sailor's life philosophy was all that different from Lula's. I mean, that's the thing. I will say this. I found their relationship in the first half of the film, during which they were just basically acting out this insane, passionate, sexual, fiery, combustible, if you will, love affair. I found that very charming and engaging, and I enjoyed watching them. Then it takes a turn halfway through. They witness a horrible car accident on the side of the highway that seems to act as a bad omen for the rest of the movie, and then things start to go downhill for them, and it's like the bloom is off the rose, and it's not like they don't like each other, but just they're not having any fun anymore, which was too bad, because I was having fun when they were having fun. I liked it better when they were just fucking and saying weird things to each other, but were clearly in love, dancing. That I was enjoying that. So I guess I was happy at the end when they reunited, I guess.
The things that aren't great are the things that essentially don't have to do with Laura Dern and Nick Cage, because their performances are pretty interesting, and the role that Nicolas Cage has in this film is pretty charismatic. but when it shifts away from them to kind of the other stuff going on, it's nowhere near as interesting.
Yeah, even when we go away from them to all of those strange assassins or underworld figures who are sending silver dollars back and forth to cement dark deals, as visually offbeat as it is, it isn't very involving, because it just becomes, okay, it's sort of weirdness for weirdness sake, and you're like, okay, well, this is David Lynch entertaining himself. It's all right. A lot of breasts, a lot of topless women of all shapes and sizes in this movie.
Oh, there's a lot of nudity, more than I was expecting.
Yeah, I was surprised. I'm like, wow, like any excuse he has to go, oh, you know what, and just she's topless. Man, there was a lot of that.
Laura Dern is topless in this film in the first 5 minutes.
Right. And I was like, oh boy, okay, I guess, is that going to be, but then she really wasn't. But like every other scene, it's almost like the joke they make about Game of Thrones. It's like, well, we need to have this guy in the scene. Let's put two women behind him, and I know, they'll be topless.
That's what it felt like. Like, that's honestly what it felt like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess, look, you've watched a few Lynch movies in a row. Did you notice, in general, I mean, besides...
There's not a lot of nudity in this movie. This movie is the most nudity I've seen in David Lynch, period.
But are there other, like, weird things that just, besides actors, that just crop up in every movie, and you're like, boy, he must really love that model car, or a snakeskin coat? I mean, are there other weird little things that are just like, well, that's weird, that cropped up again?
I mean, it's just a lot of, like, the imagery that keeps showing up is what it feels like. I mean, there's a lot of... For me, with Lynch, there's always a lot of, like, repeating imagery, but in this film, it didn't... there didn't seem to be as much of, like, the usual stuff that I expect from Lynch, so...
Yeah. I mean, this movie was all fire. Everything was fire. Matches, cigarettes, people on fire. There's a lot of fire.
Yeah. And again, like, what this really does feel like, in my mind, True Romance, because it's got two charismatic leads and then a cast of, like, crazy characters surrounding them.
Yeah.
But I prefer True Romance to this film.
Well, because True Romance feels like a fucking documentary compared to this film.
Well, True Romance feels like an actual, like, story that has a logical progression from point A to point B. I mean, I don't understand the point of Crispin Glover's character in this film. Like, I don't understand. I genuinely have no idea what his character is meant to be or what the purpose of telling the story about his character is.
I'm beginning to feel that or wonder if we had read the book. I feel stupid saying it. If we'd done our homework. But I mean, I wonder if the book is just chock full of weirdness, and that's what attracted David Lynch. And he's like, well, great, this book is already weird, and there's this little bit about this weird character with cockroaches in his underwear, and what the hell? Let's toss that in.
But I mean, here's the thing: even if we haven't read the book, which we haven't, it shouldn't preclude us from being able to understand the film.
The film should have its own internal logic.
It has, of course, it should. It's supposed to have its own internal logic. And here's the other thing. This is not a short film. This film is 2 hours long, over 2 hours long.
Yeah.
And so...
You feel it. You feel it at a certain point.
Yeah, it feels it big time.
Yeah. I
mean, again, there's like a fake-out ending, and there's the whole Bobby Peru subplot that feels... I mean, whatever Willem Dafoe decided to do in this movie is... Boy... Willem Dafoe in this movie.
You hire certain actors and you just, give them a little bit of rope, and they're like, oh, okay, great, done. I'm taking this all the way over the top.
Yeah. He, oh my God. I mean, I love Willem Dafoe. I think Willem Dafoe is absolutely like one of the finest actors working today. And he has amazing range as an actor, but dear God in heaven, his role in this film is horrifying. Like, the character that he is playing is absolutely like a monstrous character.
Yeah, when you've got a guy who has played a villain, a super villain in a Spider-Man movie, and that performance is 100 times more subdued than what he does in Wild at Heart, that's saying something.
Yeah. And that's my point here. Is like the range with which Willem Dafoe goes for it, when he really goes for it, oh my God. It is just... Yeah.
I mean, you could, I suppose, if I was in college and there was a gun to my head and I had to write a paper, maybe... Okay, try this on for size. Tell me what you think. Lula and Sailor are in a way pure and innocent in that they've got this just 100% love for each other. It blinds them to every other thing. That is all they really care about, is spending time together, talking, dancing, fucking. That's all they want in the world. And every other character has some dark, evil motivator pushing them to do bad shit. And the question becomes, can this pure, somewhat innocent love survive in a world that is evil? And we watch as it slowly claws away at them. What do you think?
I find it interesting the way that the film kind of frames the character of Nick Cage's character at the end, as he's like, I'm wild at heart, I can't be tamed, I'm no good for them. It's like, dude, did you learn nothing in the entire film? Like, at all? And like that to me, it's like it makes me wonder what they're trying to say.
Well, okay.
Right.
Is it about parenting? Is it like Diane Ladd, pretty much world's worst mother on every level?
Right.
So is it about Nicolas Cage realizing, whatever level that I'm fucked up, I keep going back to prison, I make some bad decisions. He keeps saying I didn't have a lot of parental guidance when I was young. And is it him going, you know what? Now I should just be a good parent to my son. And if I go back to her, then maybe this kid will grow up better. I mean, is that it?
I guess. I mean, look, there's a lot going on. I mean, the allusions to Wizard of Oz go even farther than just, the thing where Laura Dern keeps seeing her mom as the Wicked Witch. At the end of the film, her mom disappears.
Yeah, and there's all that's left is some smoke, and she disappears out of a photograph.
Because their water got on the photograph, like a witch.
Yeah, that is weird.
I get it. It's like you mentioned, it feels like they're trying to do a dark version of the Wizard of Oz, but like they don't fully commit to it.
Right. When you select a heightened tone and you're not playing totally realistically, what that should do is free you up to make your thematic points even clearer.
You would think.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you do it. It's like, okay, we're going to give up realism so that we can be overt in our thematic lesson here, which frankly is what Wizard of Oz does, But I did not, as the movie wore on, I did not feel I was becoming increasingly illuminated.
No, I don't either. And it's like anything else. There's a scene in this film where you've got Freddie Jones playing a character who quacks like a duck. I don't understand. Like, that's the thing. This is, in my mind, there's a lot of David Lynch stuff where it's like him just doing weird things for weirdness sake, and you just need to interpret it the way you will and move on. And then there's something like this film where things just happen that are random, and I have no idea or frame of reference on how to interpret it at all. Zero.
So just in your like ranking of the experience of sitting through and watching the film, where does this rank against, say, Dune? I
mean, Dune is a better film.
But did you enjoy watching it more?
Yes, I love Dune. I love Dune. It is a great film. I love watching it. It is a lot of fun.
But Dune might not be a great example because Dune, I think Dune divides the world. You're in book and movie. You're either in or you're not.
Well,
so
you have to buy into how weird it is from the get-go.
Yeah, but like, what else? Like, are you gonna do Blue Velvet? We've
already done Blue. I'd rather watch Blue Velvet than this.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I understood Blue Velvet. I understood it, and it's not that I don't like this because I didn't understand it. Blue Velvet didn't verge on nonsensical.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And this one does, and it's fun for a while, but then that always wears a bit thin if you don't start paying some shit off. Because then you're like, okay, now you're just jerking me around, and and if I don't find this particular scene as quirkily entertaining as the last one, then you're in trouble because now we're heading downhill and you don't have anything else to offer. So yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's like the Willem Dafoe stuff is fun for a while. The character he's playing is so over the top, so wild, so completely unhinged. It's an interesting performance, but that can only carry the film so far.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it carries it as long as it does. And again, which is why I think the first hour of this film is far more enjoyable than the second hour, not just tone-wise, like, hey, we're kind of having fun on this cross-country love affair just like they are. But whenever you're going to do that tone, it's always going to be better in the first half because it gets old. It's all icing, and there's not a ton of cake, and you can only take that flavor so long.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about this that I just don't like about this film. Is that it is so little substance that it is shockingly small amounts of substance.
Yeah. And I don't remember how this film was received at the time.
Not
was this
well.
Considered?
Not well.
So it was not celebrated. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah. It won.
Right.
So here's how poorly it was received. So David Lynch received the Palme d'Or for it, right, at Cannes. Roger Ebert led the people booing the film because it won the award. Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. That tracks.
Yeah. So it was poorly received by a large swath of critics, viewers, everyone. And so,
okay.
Yeah. So it was not well received. It's been reappraised in the years since, but yeah, not
chronologically. Are you doing the movies chronologically? Like, what was the movie he made before, and what did he do after?
We're just finishing this out because this is one of the few David Lynch movies we haven't talked about. So
what movie did he do? What was immediately before? What did he do before and right after?
Blue Velvet is what he did before. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is what he did after.
Oh wow, this is
which
really
Twin
late.
Peaks Fire Walk with Me is even more nonsensical than this film. I think this here, I haven't seen Mulholland Drive yet or The Straight Story. I know The Straight Story is rather straightforward. Mulholland Drive has a lot of stuff going on. But this right here, Wild at Heart, seems to be, because Elephant Man and Dune, pretty straightforward films.
Yeah.
And Blue Velvet, rather straightforward. But then he swings back to Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, Lost Highway, and it's like those movies are completely over the top.
Yeah.
And it's like he oscillates between being over the top or being like rather, maybe possibly even boringly so straightforward.
Yeah, almost to punish us for ever complaining about his excesses.
Exactly. And that to me is like the weird thing about David Lynch and his filmography is that it always feels like it's kind of oscillating between the two tones and ideas, but never really committing to one over the other. Well, let me take that back. Let me take that back. He commits to one or the other, and he doesn't really leave a whole lot of room for like half of one, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like in Dune, it's pretty straightforward. In Elephant Man, it's pretty straightforward. In Blue Velvet, pretty straightforward. But then you get to something like Inland Empire, and it's like, this is not straightforward at all. This is a completely, like, over-the-top, really bizarre film that requires multiple viewings and analyzing it to really understand the themes and what the film is talking about. Kind of like this movie. Like, I don't know how many times I would need to watch this movie to really, quote-unquote, get it, but I guarantee you it wouldn't be just once or twice.
Or if you ever would, if there is.
And that's the thing. I honestly don't think I would. I don't think I ever want to revisit this film, and it's not because I didn't like it, or not because I think it's a bad movie. I just don't think it's a film that, if I'm going to sit down and watch a 2-hour film, I'm not sure that this is going to be on my list of 2-hour films to watch.
Well, I'd have to bring more to it. I'd either have to read the book or read a bunch of people writing about the movie, and then going back and going, okay, well, I read some long piece explaining what it's about. Let me watch it and see if that holds up. But I don't need to go back into this world. That's, it was fun once.
Well, and apparently the original ending doesn't have the characters ending up together. So David Lynch also championed changing the ending to a happier ending, which is shocking considering David Lynch. I don't consider him like the king of happy endings. So,
right.
But yeah, he apparently championed wanting to change the ending to something a little happier, I guess.
Thank God, because man, I would not have felt like, oh wow, man, he really held to his artistic guns by not giving us the ending we want. I'm fucking happy he gave us the ending we wanted. It was one of the few things he gave us, and I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I would actually agree 100%. I think that the ending is one of the stronger parts of the film, that you actually get a happy ending for these two characters.
Yeah, and it's actually set up really nicely. I mean, with the, will he sing Love Me Tender? And look, if you like Nicolas Cage, I will say this. If you're into Nicolas Cage, see this movie. You will get the Nicolas Cage you want. This is the Nicolas Cage you want.
Well, and here's the thing. I think you're 100% right. But I mean, this is, in my mind, this is just another Nicolas Cage performance, right?
Yeah,
he doesn't really do anything particularly interesting. I mean, there are the Elvis bits in the character that Christian Slater has in True Romance. Like, think about that for a second. That's like overt copying.
Well, I mean, okay, so now maybe we all ought to sit down and watch True Romance tonight and go, oh wow, this is really influenced by Wild at Heart. We might find a lot of good stuff.
Which, I mean, again, I would much rather watch True Romance because I think True Romance has better characters, better interactions between characters, and it has more memorable scenes. And I'm not a huge fan of Tarantino either, so this is not something I would freely or readily admit, but I much preferred True Romance.
Yeah. But I mean, like there's a certain allure to the young Nicolas Cage, and movies like Moonstruck and this one. If you're going to find, I'll put it this way, if you're going to find Nicolas Cage sexy, this is the movie where rather than like a movie where he's playing a nebbish or just, this is the young, hot, sexy Nicolas Cage. If that exists for you, and I know people who it does exist for, then this will deliver.
Yeah, this is the film you want to watch when you want to see Sailor Ripley, a.k.a. Nick Cage, a.k.a. Sexy Man.
Right, yeah. You get a lot of as much topless women as you get a lot of shirtless Nicolas Cage. And then you get him in a snakeskin jacket, and then ultimately you get him singing an Elvis song. So, you can't complain.
Yeah, and that to me is, again, like, it's just, there's a lot of, if I had never seen True Romance, I wouldn't know any better, but I've seen True Romance, and I think I liked True Romance way too much to, like, not draw into this movie what I drew out of True Romance, and that, I think, is the problem.
Yeah.
Like, True Romance came out 3 years after this movie, and True Romance feels more approachable. Wild at Heart feels less approachable, but Wild at Heart also feels like less of a movie. Like, it feels like less of a cohesive, coherent experience.
So did Quentin Tarantino improve upon it when he redid it as True Romance?
I mean, True Romance is a good film. I have friends who they consider it to be their favorite movie of all time. So.
Oh, not just their favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. Their favorite movie.
Well, here's the thing. It is ultimately, I think, the things that make True Romance good are the things that make it not a Tarantino movie. Because I mean, he just wrote it. He didn't direct it. And when someone and when someone is saying, well, you don't get to direct and write, you just get to write, that takes some of the things that I have problems with Tarantino. It takes those things that he could have done and screwed up, and it takes him out of his hands.
Who did it? Was it Tony Scott?
Tony Scott.
It was. Jesus. And I'll tell you, I mean, if there's a director I do not like.
Tony Scott.
Yeah, I am not a Tony Scott fan. I mean, nothing against the man, but I more often than not, I'm like, I can't take the way this is directed. Like that level of it's like rejecting an organ. I'm just not into that his thing.
You're not a fan of Top Gun?
No, I'm going to say I'm not.
Yeah, me either. So, no,
okay. I mean, you were setting me up. Okay.
No. I mean, I get it, and, the thing is, I like David Lynch a lot. That's the unfortunate part. I was hoping to like this film a lot, and I didn't. And that's disappointing to me because I had heard a lot of good things about it, and it ended up not being the film that I was hoping it was going to be, and I'm not holding that against the film. I just wish there was more to it.
Yeah, and I guess my feeling was it was just so, in a weird way, at this moment in my life, so refreshing to go back to that sort of late 80s, after hours, just like, we're just going to be
Yeah,
weird.
You're just mentioning better movies. After Hours is probably my second favorite Scorsese film. Like, I loved After Goodfellas.
Oh, okay, well, all right, I'll accept that. But what about King of Comedy?
I mean, King of Comedy is like third or fourth.
Okay, so it's up there.
I think it goes for me, Goodfellas, After Hours, Casino, King of Comedy.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, there are some earlier ones, but okay. Yeah, I mean, I like Taxi Driver.
I mean, I'm not one of those people that will extol the wisdom of Taxi Driver. I never have been, and I never will be. I just don't like it that much, and that's just me personally.
Yeah, but the thing about After Hours, though, but if you put a gun to my head, I'm not sure I could come up with what After Hours is about. Like, well, now that the movie concludes, like, this is a movie, it's a reflection on this character and their journey from this to that. It's an enjoyable ride, but by the end, I'm kind of like, okay, that was that, no real complaints, but I'm not sure. I mean, we'll have to do another podcast, but I don't know if I'm like, I get what he's saying.
Right.
When you go out all night in New York.
Well, but I mean, but in my mind, the thing about After Hours that works is that is kind of just the conceit of the film. Is that it's this guy who has a milquetoast, fucking normal, straightforward day job, and this one night of his year, of this week, he is trying to just have a normal night, and he ends up getting embroiled in this like crazy black comedy farcical adventure that ends up right back in front of his job to go do his boring day all over again. Like that's I mean, I pretty much just sold the film, right? Like that makes sense. Like it's about how mundane life is, and then all of a sudden it's just not anymore, but it just goes back to being mundane like that.
And I think there was, and I don't know because I have never lived in New York City, but just from living through the 80s and seeing New York City portrayed in various ways, I get the feeling that it played into a sense at that time that New York was a very unique, specific place where it's almost like you could have a night like that. Like New York, was a bit of a cocaine-fueled nightmare. And that's how people were experiencing it, and this was a story told through that prism.
And I agree. I mean, like that's, and like I believe that. Like I genuinely believe that is something that could like be real in the 80s. Like not so much anymore, but like in the 80s, I believe. And the analog for LA is Into the Night, which it kind of has
that's another one.
Yeah, it kind of has that similar feel. But yeah, like when you think about something like Wild at Heart, like I couldn't tell you what Wild at Heart is really about.
Well, that's why it felt like Southern Gothic at first. I'm like, is this like Tennessee Williams, on acid? Is that the idiom we're exploring here?
Right.
And then they go to New Orleans. I'm like, oh, maybe that's it. Then they go to Texas, and I'm like, yeah, maybe that's what we're doing is some sort of weird Southern Gothic noir. I don't know.
But if that's what they were going for, they kind of fell short of it anyways.
Yeah, it's like we're talking about Scorsese, and you could say Scorsese weighed in on New York in the 70s and sort of said, okay, here's what I think New York in the 70s was all about. You could point at his movies and talk about that. And then After Hours was sort of, okay, well, now New York is different. Now it's the 80s, and here's New York in the 80s. Again, an argument could be made. I'm not sure where I'd start with Wild at Heart.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's like very Southern Gothic inspired, but I think, like you mentioned, at the end of the day, okay.
Yeah.
It has nothing interesting to say. It doesn't feel like it honestly says much of anything. And when the film is over, I just would rather watch something else.
Well, there you
have it. That's unfortunate. Like, again, it's so close to other films that I watched this year for the first time that I liked so much more that it is unfortunate.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess my bar was pretty low. So.
I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So there you have Wild at Heart.
What would you give the film out of 5?
I'm going to give it a 3, simply because I did enjoy the experience of watching it. I came to this one pretty clean. And so I'm going to say if it was opening weekend for Wild at Heart this weekend and I wandered in out of the rain and sat down, I would go, okay, could have been a lot better, but I didn't walk out. And I'm not in a bad mood when it's over. I wasn't. So I'll give it a 3.
Yeah, I'll give it like a 2.5. I mean, it's okay. Yeah. It's not my favorite. It's not something I think I'm going to come back to anytime soon. And it's not something that I really, I don't know. It's disappointing. But the only thing I knew about it going into it was Willem Dafoe's character was completely unhinged. But that's it. Yeah,
I could feel your 2.5-ness throughout much of this podcast.
Yeah. Which, again, it's unfortunate, but yeah, I'll give it 2.5 Willem Dafoe heads flying through the air out of 5. So.
Done.
Yeah. So let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
This morning you fall and you can't get off the floor. That's your hips, Alvin. And you're going to have to use a walker now to get around.
No walker. I love a lightning storm.
Me too, Dad. Uncle Al, I had a stroke.
Rose, darling, I'm going to go back on the road. And I've got to make this trip on my own. I've got to go see Lyle. I know you understand.
Alvin, you're going to get blown off the road. That's what I'm afraid.
Mount Zion, Wisconsin? Why didn't you just take your car?
I don't have a driver's license.
That's 60 more miles of hills. That's across the Mississippi.
I'm having a little engine trouble.
I'd be happy to drive you the rest of the way to Mount Zion.
I still want to finish this the way I started. And this trip is a hard swallow for my pride. I just hope I'm not too late. You've got 2 brothers that haven't spoken in 10 years. I want to make peace. I want to sit with him, look up at the stars, like we used to do so long ago. A brother's a brother.
That's right. On the next Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about David Lynch's only film that he did for Disney, which, yes, is an actual thing. We're going to be talking about The Straight Story, which is another autobiographical or another biopic, which should be interesting. I will be joined by my good friend Father Malone for that one. However, until then, where can people find you, Richard?
You can go to DC Universe and subscribe and watch Titans Season 2 and Season 1, but Season 2 just concluded. And if you're living outside of the United States, you can watch it on Netflix once 2020 rolls around. I'm back in the writer's room already, hard at work on Season 3, so there's more Titans to come. So there's still plenty of time to catch up, and there'll be more coming your way.
Just don't shit the bed in the final episode of the season.
I've got a note card with those words above my computer, so don't
shit the bed.
That's right.
Again. As for myself, you can find me on Twitter at casualty_Chris. You'll find the podcast over at culturecast.com. You'll find links over to iTunes. We are on Patreon. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, as always. We are also on iTunes, Google Play, anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find our podcast. Big thanks to Tiger Blood Jewel for our music for the podcast, which is The Bayou, and to you, Richard, for joining me, because I know you don't have to, but I know you want to. There's a difference.
I do, and I'll be back again.
You'll be back again next month. I don't remember what we're talking about, and I don't know if we should tell people what we're talking about yet either. But I think, if I remember correctly, we might be enjoying it more than this.
I know what it is. And it's a movie.
Oh, right. Yeah, no. I remember now, too. And I don't think either one of us have seen it before.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward. I've heard it's good. So
I've heard it's good as well. But I've also heard that this was good. So maybe people just like to lie. So make sure to check out the next episode.